Welcome to another episode of The Catholic Novel. Today we're going to talk about Myles Connolly's novel, Mr. Blue. Now this novel is a bit shorter than the other novels we've been talking about, either in the first series or in this series. And while I like the novel very much, and I think you will too, I wouldn't put it at the same level as Graham Greene's novels or Alice McDermott's novels, or even The War's Brideshead Revisited. It's reading it. I read it I think when I was in college, and I read it for this show. And I had the reaction both times, and maybe this will make sense to you. I admired the character tremendously. It's not so much a story as it's a character study. He's kind of a contemporary St. Francis. But while you admire him, you also keep saying to yourself, gee, this seems a little bit extreme, you know. I don't think I can follow this guy Blue, even though I admire him immensely. So he's a kind of a contemporary St. Francis. The novel is narrated by a successful businessman who met Blue and, was kind of overwhelmed by him. He, when the successful businessman meets Mr. Blue, Blue is living on the top of an apartment building in the open air. And when in inclement weather, he puts up some kind of a tent. Now, I don't think I'm going to do that. Okay, so there are several things like that. But, I've been thinking about it in preparation for this particular episode. And what is clear is that the character Mr. Blue sees right through the consumer culture. And the businessman, while he admires him, also, I think his conscience is being bothered by Mr. Blue, okay? Now, in doing research for this particular episode, I had a vague memory that Myles Connolly had worked with Frank Capra, and that proved to be true. And apparently, he was kind of a bug in Capra's ear. He kept saying to Capra, you have tremendous talent. You shouldn't be doing frivolous movies. You should be making things that are important. Now, whether Capra changed because of Connolly, I don't know. But if you look at the films that Capra made, somewhere in the 1930s, they suddenly become masterpieces. Meet John Doe, Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and then, of course, perhaps the greatest of all of them, It's a Wonderful Life, okay? And all of them, I think, are quite, all the main characters, Meet John Doe, Mr. Deeds, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, even George Bailey, all of them are Christ figures. Capra claimed that every time he did a shot with a camera, just before he said a little prayer, and he says, this is in his autobiography, he says, you're going to find this very difficult to believe, but I did that before every time the camera was turned on. I don't think it's difficult to believe at all. I think watching the movies, this guy must have been inspired by something. He was a Catholic, and he said, the resurrection is a comedy. Death loses and Christ wins. So I don't know how much Connolly affected him, influenced him. I really don't know. So I admire Mr. Blue. You know what? I feel a little bit like I feel when I go over to the Catholic Worker. Maybe once a year I go over to the Catholic Worker and give a talk, and I find those people so inspiring. I'm presuming that you know what the Catholic Worker is. It's a group of Catholics living in the Bowery, wearing donated clothes, having a soup kitchen every day, putting out a newspaper every month, and they don't proselytize. They just bear witness. They just live among the poor. And I tell you, when I go over to give a talk, one of the reasons I go over is to be inspired. But I haven't moved into the Catholic Work at House of Hospitality yet either. So that's how I feel with Mr. Blue. I admire him, but maybe the novel could be tightened a bit and made maybe a little bit more realistic, although maybe that's me. Maybe it's realistic and I'm missing it. Okay, so what's very interesting to me is everybody who has read this novel remembers one scene in it. If you ask someone, have you read Mr. Blue, and then ask them if they have, say, well, what do you recall? I can guarantee you this will be the scene they recall. So Blue's mission was to enliven the love of Christ in people's hearts. So though it's not a philosophical book or a theological book, I think Blue would believe, the first thing in the Catechism, we are made to know, love, and serve God in this life and be happy with him in the next. So there's a profound need in everybody for God. And Blue is going to spend his life trying to provoke people and stimulate people and challenge people and so on. And one of the ways he does it is he's a creative artist. So he writes this screenplay, and he narrates the screenplay to this businessman. And this is the scene that I think everybody who has read this novel remembers. The story takes place in an atheistic society. Religion has been banished. People are living like zombies. Everybody's got a number. There's no social life at all. The food is just to keep them under control. And there's no joy. There's no human joy in this society. And then as the film develops, Blue says, he gives the number of the person. One man sneaks away when no one's looking, goes out to a field and finds some fresh dirt. And he buries something. And as the film develops, as it progresses, you discover he is growing wheat. And when he gets the wheat, he makes a host. I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly how he gets the wine, but he probably steals some grapes or something. I don't remember the details. But he then goes to a very, very high tower, and it turns out this particular prisoner, if you can call them prisoners, they're all subject to the atheistic state, is a priest. So the head of the state thinks they have killed all the priests. They have wiped out all the priests. But in Blue's screenplay, there is this one priest left. So he goes up this tower, and he starts saying Mass. And this is a very exciting part of the movie. The word goes around that that's what he's doing. So the head of the state orders some planes to come and bomb the tower, that Mass must not be said. So Blue is emphasizing that the villains in this particular screenplay really hate God. They're promoting a death of God culture, and they mean death of God literally, to wipe the need of God out of everybody's life. So he orders these planes, and there is, I can almost picture the movie. In the movie, I suspect it would be a montage. You'd see the planes getting ready to take off. You'd see the priest starting the Mass, okay? And the planes get closer and so on, and the people near the tower are in touch with the head of the society. The planes are coming, but we don't know where he is in the Mass and so on. Okay, so he gets eventually to the consecration, and this is what I would like to read to you. When the people realize what he's doing, that I'm calling them soldiers, when the people who run the state, they say, "The master is furious, bomb the tower, destroy it, demolish it, but stop the Mass," okay? So that's the emphasis. The Mass is going to symbolize salvation, resurrection, and so on. This is Blue telling the business. And now the priest comes to the words that shall bring Christ to earth again. His head almost touches his altar. Now this is when the Mass is in Latin, okay? Hoc est enim corpus meum. This is my body. Blue was whispering. I think he was shivering. This is the businessman commenting. The bomb did not drop. No. There was a moment of awful silence. Then a burst of light beside which day itself is dusk. Then a trumpet peal, a single trumpet peal that shook the universe. Then the sun blew up like a bubble. The stars and planets vanished like sparks. The earth burst asunder. And through the unspeakable luminous new day, through the vault of the sky ribbed with lightning, came Christ as he had come after the resurrection. It was the end of the world. Blue's last words were just barely audible. The kingdom of the Antichrist disappeared like ashes in a whirlwind, and hastening up out of their tombs and resting places came the souls of the just, happy, hearty, wholesome, to greet their king. Blue paused, then he added, Father White, who had been numbered 2,757,311, found himself a hero, even in heaven. As I say, nobody who has read the book ever forgets that. So I think I like a novel like this. It kind of gets us back to basics, to what really is important. Is it totally believable? I don't think so. Perhaps a writer more skilled than Myles Connolly could have done a better job, although maybe not. Maybe you really need a light hand with a book like this. So every novel we deal with in these series, I'm recommending to you. So I've chosen them all, and I think they're all important. This one, though, is different. As I said, it's shorter. Myles Connolly is not Graham Greene, he's not Alice McDermott, he's not Evelyn Waugh, okay? But still, I think there's room, in our library and in our reading habit for a book like this. And maybe a book like this would even, I'm wondering now, maybe it would even lend itself to discussion more than some of those other classic novels. I could picture a really good discussion. How far would we go with Blue? How far do we think Mr. Blue, the character, is more realistic about life than you and I are? So maybe one of the reasons I don't praise it quite as much as I praise the other novels is it bothers my conscience, okay? Maybe to see a kind of a contemporary St. Francis disturbs me. I have a joke I tell at St. John's University. I tell them I was very glad when I heard that Mother Teresa had died, because I was afraid she and I were going to die on the same day. And we would come up to St. Peter, and he would say, Mother Teresa, what have you done with your life? And she would say, well, I've saved hundreds and hundreds of dying people in Calcutta. And St. Peter would say, enter the kingdom of heaven. Father Lauder, what have you done with your life? And I would say, St. Peter, I've seen some great movies. Okay, I hope he says, all right, get in, come on in, okay? But so certain characters disturb us, and maybe this is the value of this novel. Maybe it is overdone. Maybe it is a little bit incredible. But that may be okay for a book. Maybe some books have to be that way, to kind of wake us up and to kind of jolt us and shock us. I'm sorry Myles Connolly didn't write more. He may have written more in Hollywood, but I mean, as far as I know, this is the only novel I've ever read by him, and it's the only novel by him that I've ever heard of. This novel, you could almost picture Frank Capra writing it. I mean, I don't know how close Connolly and Capra were as friends, but they seem to have the same instincts. They seem to have the same sense of human nature, that life is a tremendous mystery, and the basic reaction should be rejoicing. So I think it's interesting at the end, in the screenplay, when the host is consecrated, okay, people rise from the dead happy, which is what Scripture tells us is going to happen at the end of the world, okay? It's a different angle on the Mass than you get from a novel like Heart of the Matter or Silence, okay? The emphasis in this novel is joy. In some of the other novels, the emphasis, you got to make a decision, which way you're going to go. So I definitely do not want to discourage anyone from reading this novel. I don't think anyone who reads it will say, I really found it kind of boring or wasting my time. Would it make a film? I think it could, but it would have to be added to. Would have to get more. Would have to get more scenes. In a movie, you can't just have somebody telling someone else's story. You've got to film it somehow. But with the right actors and the right music and so on, it might make it really. It might fit in right now where we are now in our lives. In this country, people might be just looking for something like this. So, am I recommending it? Definitely. Is it different from the other novels? Definitely. So take a chance on it. I think you will enjoy it.